cultures and civilizations around the world all recognize the fact that human beings have a limited time here on Earth. And in order to cope with this, we've invented some pretty crazy myths to explain where we'll end up when we're dead and gone. Grand celestial kingdoms, endless battlefields, and bizarre cubes under the ground are just some of the weird realms we've dreamt up. But what's even stranger is that many of these afterlife myths share almost identical beliefs with those of other cultures, despite existing thousands of miles and sometimes years apart. So let's find out about the elements these ancient beliefs share in our video on the similarities in afterlife myths across civilizations. In at number 5, God. In almost every religion and every myth with creation at its heart, there exists one or more supreme beings, and whether they're immortal hammer gods or sexy water goddesses, they all have one thing in common. They are better than you. And with afterlife myths, this goes even further, because not only did they build you and create all that you know, but they also get to decide on where you go when you die. This is a theme shared by many different societies. It doesn't matter where you are in the world or what time period you're from. Ancient Egyptian, Iroquois Indian, or modern Scientologist, you all believe that you were put here by an entity more powerful than you, and when you depart it will be on their terms. So why did human beings go this way? Let's face it, we're a pretty egotistical species. So surely it would have made more sense for us to believe that we ourselves were gods and that we decide where we'll go when we die. But just think about it. Humans created fire. We invented the wheel. We can control and manipulate other creatures for our food, our transport, and if we're feeling adventurous, our pleasure. Based on this, we could have been forgiven for appointing ourselves as gods. How come there are no religions that believe human beings have a say in where they go in the afterlife? Why is there free will in life but not in death? No! Instead of placing humans in charge of their own afterlife destiny, we assumed something more powerful was behind all that we knew. So why is that? Well, the answer may lie in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Evidence for mankind's belief in the afterlife goes back a heck of a long way, at least 50 to 100,000 years. And so far, almost every human culture we know of has some kind of explanation for what happens when we die. With one notable exception, the Piraha, because these guys just don't give a rat's ass. The Piraha are an indigenous tribe who inhabit a remote region of Brazil. And these hunter-gatherers are the only known example of a completely godless human society. The Piraha lack words for numbers and colors. They have no form of social hierarchy or leadership structure. They do not measure time, and one of their firmest beliefs is a total opposition to coercion, i.e., they don't go around telling people what to do. Furthermore, the Piraha culture is solely concerned with the things you have directly experienced. Jesus as a concept has been introduced to the Piraha several times in their history, but they reject him due to the simple fact that nobody who believes in Jesus has actually seen him. They are a very literal society. If you haven't experienced it, they ain't interested. Basically, the Piraha base their lives on the mantra, "Pix or it didn't happen." So unless you've experienced the afterlife and come back to tell the tale, you'll have a hard time convincing the Piraha there's any kind of existence after you die. But how does this explain how afterlives and gods were created elsewhere? Is there a connection between the invention of God and afterlives and societal hierarchies? Well, as we said before, we humans are pretty egotistical, and we do love telling folks what to do. So if you're looking to cement your power as head of a tribe or community, What better way to do it than to invent an afterlife and claim that you have a direct line to the guy with the guest list? Many leaders use the idea of God controlling a restrictive afterlife to retain and increase their power. And psychologists, philosophers, historians, and neuroscientists are united in their belief that this plays on the fact that humans are biologically predisposed into believing in something bigger than ourselves. With the possible exception of the Piraha, most humans cannot accept what we see is all there is. There has to be something more. There has to be an afterlife, and a creator, and a purpose for all of this. And guess what? This belief in a higher power and an afterlife is hardwired into every single one of us on a deep level of our consciousness. According to cognitive scientists, humans are born believers. We are born to find patterns and seek justice in life, so we believe it occurs in death too. Neuroscience tells us that spiritual belief is something greater than ourselves, be it God or an afterlife, is present on some level in every human being, regardless of their nationality, upbringing, or education. And this brings us to a rather amusing conclusion, that whether you say you believe in God and the afterlife, or you don't, is actually irrelevant. Because hilariously, according to science, it may be the atheists who don't really exist. Number 4. Fire. God was a pretty heavy topic to open with, so let's take a look at something simpler: fire. The idea of burning for all eternity in a world of fiery pits is commonly attributed to the Christian idea of hell. But for some reason, fire seems to play a role in many different afterlife myths, despite it being somewhat essential for cultured human beings to exist. We use fire to cook toast, to heat our homes, to light our reefers. But if you see flames after you've died, you're almost certainly in a really bad place. The Islamic afterlife of Jahannam sees its residents dragged through fire, being forced to wear clothes that are on fire, have their organs burnt in front of them, and have their skin burnt off entirely, only for it to be regenerated and then burnt off again just for fun. The Greek afterlife myths also speak of a lake of fire, as does the Egyptian afterlife myth, and the Christian concept of purgatory is supposedly filled with fire as a means of cleansing oneself of the sins which prevent your ascension to heaven. So why is this? Did early man associate the uncontrollable nature of fire with death and destruction? Was it perhaps linked to the idea of burning our enemies alive to remove them from Earth? Intriguingly, some religions go in the opposite direction and use water as their tool to inspire fear of the netherworld. New Guineans believe that their underworld was beneath the ocean, as do members of the North American Navajo tribe. A journey across water to reach the afterlife. It's also a surprisingly common theme, as you'll know from the Greek tale of the boatman and the river Styx. But this is an idea shared by the Italian Etruscans, who, instead of traveling by boat, believed that they would be ferried to their afterlife of Elysium on the backs of seahorses and dolphins. So what made some civilizations choose fire to represent their afterlife and others choose water? Were they linked in some way by a shared experience of a natural disaster? Or are we humans simply more inclined towards pessimism, with even the life-giving properties of fire and water used against us for religious purposes? I don't know, but I do know that when I die, I would love to try the Italian thing with the sea creatures. Number 3. Up is good, bad is down. Another bizarre similarity between many different myths and religions is the idea that the good afterlife is located somewhere high up in the sky, whereas the bad people are sent deep underground to somewhere dark and terrible. Obviously, this may have something to do with the fact that underground caves are dark and occasionally terrible, and clouds are super-duper pretty. But is this enough to explain the sheer number of religions who have adopted this idea? Ancient Mesopotamians believed that the dead went to live in a subterranean world known as the Dark Earth. and they thought that every hole and cave could potentially be an access point. Other examples include the Central American Mayans, who said that the souls of the dead went to an underground world known as Xibalba, the Greenland Inuit, who believe in an underworld called Sedna, and the ancient Chinese, whose hell consists of 18 levels beneath the earth. And then you got the Igbo people of Africa who believe that their dead traveled deep underground to live inside the womb of the goddess Allah. Sounds cozy. Then there's your typical fancy-pants fun-time kingdom in the sky, which is thought to be the location of the good afterlife by everyone from Vikings and Eskimos through to Christians and Wiccans. All of these vastly different religions place their positive afterlife above our current plane of existence, both literally and figuratively. And so far, we have not been able to find a single myth which states that when you die, you get to go live underground with the mole people. Do you guys know of any? If so, tell us in the comments below. But what we have found are various groups of people who believe that heaven lies neither up nor down, but to the side. The Native American Papago and Pima tribes thought that there was a place to the east where in death you'd be free of hunger and thirst. Other Native American tribes said that their heaven was somewhere out to the west, as did the Polynesians and European Celts. So it seems that regardless of their differences, most religions agree that heaven is not a place on earth, despite what that 80s song might have you believe. At 2. Judgment. The Abrahamic religions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism believe that humans are judged based on their actions during life, after which they'll be sent to an afterlife which represents their moral purity. If you've kept your wiener clean, wore a hat on Thursdays, or done whatever other crazy business your God asked of you, you'll go to the good kind of afterlife. And if not, you'll go somewhere bad forever. This idea is nothing new, and it has formed a key part of many ancient afterlife myths, including those of ancient Egyptians and Greeks. In each of these religions, your morality is determined by a god or goddess, and once they've made their decision, they can send you to the appropriate afterlife. But judgment can be made without the involvement of a god, and it plays a huge role in the reincarnation myths of Buddhism and Chinese religions. Within these belief systems, those who perform good deeds and resist their human desires either reincarnate as a lucky person, or they escape Earth permanently and head to a higher plane of existence. However, if you are a bad person, you will become trapped in the endless cycle of life and death on Earth, destined to live out your days without ever knowing what's on the other side. Reincarnation beliefs are shared among all the major Indian religions, and they can be seen in many tribal religions of the world too, in places as far and wide as Australia, Siberia, South America, and Eastern Asia. But for the most part, they share the same idea, that only by resisting certain behaviors and temptations can you escape constant reincarnation and reach nirvana, where Smells Like Teen Spirit plays for eternity and everyone gets to wear oversized flannel shirts. But isn't it weird that all these religions share the belief that you must live life according to certain rules in order to enjoy a pleasant afterlife? This doesn't do much to dispel the idea that religion was created for no other reason than to control people. How did so many separate groups of human beings come up with the same idea of using moral judgments as afterlife entry criteria? And are there any civilizations that reject this way of thinking? Sure are. The earliest Jews and Mesopotamians believed that the afterlife was the same for all people, regardless of your actions. And the people of Polynesia thought that your destination in the afterlife was down to your class, with commoners and upper classes retaining their status after death. But for some religions, the idea of heaven and hell is replaced by something way more badass: eternal war. And at number 1, eternal war. In both Aztec and Norse religions, the dead move on to either a world of endless war or paradise, depending on the whims of their god and whether they died in battle. Vikings believed that half of those killed in combat would continue to fight alongside Odin after death, whereas the others get to sit in a field and get drunk with the goddess Freya. But there's no indication that Norse mythology used morals to determine which afterlife you got. And what's even more bizarre is that anyone who died from boring stuff like sickness or old age would head off to hell. That's hell with one L, for an eternity of dreariness and drudgery. The Aztecs had a similar set of dual destinations in mind for their heroic warriors, as their gods would either send them to a paradise in the east or to fight alongside their war god in battle. These warriors were joined by those who had sacrificed themselves and women who had died in childbirth, as they were deemed equally as honorable as fighters. And much like the Vikings, the Aztecs also had little respect for those who were killed by old age and disease, as people who died an unremarkable death were sent to Mictlan, where you'd have to traverse through several levels of existence to reach the good levels. These non-judgmental belief systems are perhaps explained by the fact that both the Vikings and Aztecs were brutal as f***. It's easy to convince a group of warriors to give their lives in battle if they believe they'll be rewarded for it in the afterlife. And this ideology is something we're all too familiar with in the modern age, with people across the world sacrificing themselves every day to appease an extremist interpretation of their chosen religion. But despite what your racist uncle says, Islam is not alone in suffering from this plague. Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Judaism have all been used by nut jobs to justify suicide attacks in recent years. The simple fact is that you're unlikely to feel as though you have a stake in this world if your daily experience seems inferior to what awaits you in death. And this belief has motivated everyone from the Aztec warriors and Christian crusaders through to modern-day extremists into giving their lives while taking those of others. But it turns out they shouldn't have bothered. They were all wrong. Because all of humanity shares one single religion. But to find out what it is, you'll have to join our Patreon's bonus video access for $2 a month. It is here you'll find our bonus video for this piece entitled, The One True Religion. Strange Mysteries Patreons get far more than just exclusive clips like this, because for just $2 a month, you'll also be able to help us decide what videos to make, find out which topics are in the pipeline, and ask the Strange Mysteries team any questions you might have about our work, our lives, or our checkered sexual past. We're pretty open. Instead of relying on clickbaity thumbnails to decide which crappy videos to put up, we're finding the juiciest ideas and packing them full of the most mind-blowing content we can. Just like this video and a few of the previous ones. Did you like this video? Then watch more of it in the One True Religion bonus segment, while also helping us continue to make more like it. Want to continue watching regular Strange Mysteries? Then check out this link to our recent video on what's beyond the edge of the universe.